Biden's budget seeks cybersecurity spend increase. CISA expands royal ransomware warning, and cloud exploitation on the rise. These are some of the stories that my colleagues and I have been bringing to you on this week's cybersecurity headlines. And now we get a chance for some inside opinion and expertise on these stories and more from our guest, Nick Espinosa, the host of the Deep Dive radio show. Nick, thank you so much for being here.
Glad to be here. Let's do this.
All right. Before we jump into the news, of course, we have to thank our sponsor, Packet Labs. Trust the ethical hackers at Packet Labs for expert penetration testing services. Remember, you can join us on YouTube Live. To do so, go to CISOSeries.com, hit the events dropdown, and look for the Cybersecurity Headlines Week in Review image. You can count it. It's the third one down. Click on it to join us. We can't wait to have you. We've got about 20 minutes, though, so let's dive in. Our first one here, Biden's budget seeks to increase cybersecurity spending. President Biden's budget proposal for fiscal year 2023 calls for wide-ranging investments to boost the cybersecurity resilience of the U.S. government and to implement his recently released cyber strategy. We talked about it on the show last week, which calls for a whole-of-government approach to boosting U.S. digital defenses. So, Nick, lots of investment written into this proposal, with CISA standing to receive more than $3 billion. But the elephant in the room, quite literally, will be the fact that such a proposal is unlikely to make it through the House of Representatives. Of course, we're all entitled to our political alignments, but I guess what goes through your mind when you see efforts to shore up security getting jeopardized by politics, or is there always wisdom in kind of giving these, when we're talking about outlaying billions of dollars, a second look to these kind of proposals?
Yeah, and I think that's a really good question here. But I think it's important to remember that, we usually, from whatever major news source, wherever we get our news, we only get half the story when it comes to the passage of bills and stuff like that. So, for example, obviously during the Trump administration, there were contentious years, very much political infighting back and forth. But in the last month or so of his presidency, they passed an IoT security bill almost unanimously in both houses, and it was signed into law. And nobody heard about this except for the cybersecurity news watchers of the world. I actually got to interview one of the sponsors of the bill. She's the Democrat sponsor from Illinois, and the other one was Will Hurd, Republican of Texas. And so they can come together. Now, the issue here, I think, is one part politics. And by that, I mean, like, if you're looking at from like a strategy standpoint, the right side of the aisle is looking to block spending. And so advancements that would put Biden in a positive light probably are not part of their game plan. And for the record, the Biden administration, as I think if you follow cybersecurity news, has been on a real tear for cyber.
Oh, Nick, I think we lost your
we're all
audio.
good. We're all good. Nope, we're all good. I accidentally hit my keyboard. Sorry about that. But the Biden administration, hey, it's live. What are you going to do? The Biden administration basically has been on a tear for these kinds of things. Now, I think the other issue that we have here appears that this is going to be bundled into a bigger budget with non-cybersecurity or defense things. And so I think there could be some less important or less interesting spending in there, which could end up in a fight blocking the whole passage. I mean, we'll see, but I do think this is not going to pass only because, again, to the partisan infighting that we've got right now between two sides. And what we're really seeing is the trust breaking down between those two sides. And it's just really unfortunate.
Next up here, CISA warns of royal ransomware attacks against critical infrastructure. Royal ransomware continues to make waves to the point that CISA has expanded its advisory to not just healthcare, but also to critical infrastructure sectors, including manufacturing, communications, and education. It sounds, some might say that expanding such a warning is kind of redundant, since your critical infrastructure, you probably should be remaining vigilant, especially in the face of, we've already seen sophisticated actors targeting all of these industries. I guess, Nick, do you think there's more at play here? Maybe iterative messaging campaign, maybe some added intel on Royal's intentions that maybe has gone through back channels and now they're kind of going more public with it?
Yeah, so to start with the first premise of just we're getting slammed with all these warnings here, I think one of the biggest issues that we have in cybersecurity is complacency when it comes to threats. Now, think about it this way. Imagine, if we're in a war, like an active war, an alarm bells start going off to warn a local population that there's going to be an incoming air raid during the war, and then imagine the enemy bombers didn't show. Now imagine that those sirens are going off a ton of times and there are no bombers that show up. What eventually happens? The local population starts to panic less. They don't go to the bomb shelters. They eventually just start ignoring the warnings. Other locations are getting bombed, but they're not getting bombed. And here we are. So it's technically all good until that one time when they actually are getting bombed. That's what we're fighting against in cybersecurity. We hear about attacks in the news all the time. And while it makes the population more aware of things like privacy and breach issues, at some point, they just become numb to that. And because it's not happening to them. So this could be simply another warning that will get lost in the fray. But I would be willing to bet that because this is being put out, that probably Royals IOCs or indicators of compromise are starting to get picked up in other sectors, hence this expanded alert. Groups like this have to change up tactics to basically keep ahead of the game. On top of this, they maybe found new exploits in the wild for things like industrial control systems or ICS, because manufacturing's on that list, that prompted them to switch. So we'll see what happens, but essentially that's what we're fighting against, and that's probably why this won't go well in terms of awareness, because quite frankly it's just another one in the cacophony of alerts we're getting lately.
Yeah, the CISA is crying wolf quite often,
Yeah.
and they have to. It's kind of a catch-22, because if they know stuff and they don't say anything, but human nature, you're absolutely right.
Right, right. Well, and one of the biggest problems I see with CISOs, that I talk with and work with, is that they have a very hard time with nerd to English translation. And how do you translate in actual risk, hard and soft dollars, that this potential ransomware gang could hurt us to X amount, have stoppages, reputation damage, all of that. These are things that oftentimes get lost in translation when you're talking to leadership as well. So there's the other side of that coin.
Next up here, cloud exploitation on the rise. This comes from a new report from CrowdStrike. They found that overall cloud exploitation against organizations increased 95% on the year, with cases involving cloud conscious threat actors nearly tripled. I love that even threat actors are now cloud native. Attackers continue to increase efficiency, with social engineering tactics increasing on the year, particularly targeted around getting around the old SMS based multi factor authentication using the classic of SIM swapping. So, Nick, was SIM swapping something you had on your nefarious cloud hacking techniques bingo card for 2023?
Dude, SMS swapping is always on my bingo card. It's such low-hanging fruit at this point, and it still amazes me that we have just a whole lot of people out there that consider that type of multi-factor authentication still secure. Not to mention the platforms of the world where that's your only option. If I'm signing up for a bank and the only MFA I get is a text as opposed to authenticator app or hardware token, I'm switching banks. Now, granted, it's better than nothing. But then again, we also have a ton of people out there that just have usernames and passwords with no MFA at all, right? So overall, I don't think this is going to harm the continuous cloud adoption and migration we've seen over the years, especially since the pandemic dropped a supercharger into that. But every single year, the CSA, or Cloud Security Alliance, conducts a poll of corporations on cloud adoption security. And from what I understand, since 2017, more corporations have been trusting the cloud than on-premise solutions, and that number continues to grow year over year. And so I think what we're going to see is a boom for the identity access management solutions that go way beyond the SMS text verifications of the world. And that is something that is to their advantage in terms of marketing, if they're able to get in front of it and say, stop using, SMS, stop using text, move over to, this IAM, this identity access management platform. And it's just better off for everybody. But I don't think this is going away anytime soon. And in 2024, guess what will be on my bingo card again? And there you go. So
will that be the free space going forward?
It's the wild card, right? It just is what it is. Oh, you didn't get hit. You don't know how? It's SMS swapping. That's what it is.
All right, next up here, EPA releases cybersecurity notice for water systems. The advisory warns that water systems in the U.S. are increasingly vulnerable to cyber attacks. This comes from both cybercriminal and state-affiliated actors. The Biden administration announced it would make it mandatory for states to conduct security audits on their water systems. Now, there is a little bit of history to this. The EPA had already released guides to security audits for these systems, and the advisory included public disclosure of 3 recent ransomware attacks on water systems hitting California, Maine, and Nevada, including one case where a system that was used to control SCADA industrial controls got hacked. It seems that OT systems always get left out in the cold when it comes to public attention. I guess, Nick, why do you think we have such trouble keeping these elements of our infrastructure safe?
Honestly, government doesn't spend. And what I'm talking about is local government. I mean, the shot across the bow on this one was back in 2021 with Oldsmar, Florida. If you remember, somebody broke in and started introducing lye into the water population and the water tables, which basically would have killed every man, woman, child, and animal drinking from that source, which is about 15,000 people in Oldsmar, Florida. But what we saw as a result of that was essentially an inspector general going through the 50 plus 1,000 water and wastewater districts we have here in the United States, saying these are wholly inadequate. I could teach a third grade class how to break into this, and that is very, very damning to the United States. I mean, we are seeing what's going on right now, in Eastern Europe and all of that, where we're looking for impending attacks, but our local governments just do not have the funding. They do not have the resources to keep this up. I've written articles about this. I've been ringing this bell for years, and here we are. I'm glad to see that there are guidelines coming out, but if nobody's actually giving the water and wastewater districts the cash to do this, we're going to be in the same boat. Not to mention government moves slowly. We might have an executive order right now that says we're going to secure these things, and it's going to take 5 years. So that's the other big problem that we've got. Not to mention supply chain issues to get the equipment, et cetera, et cetera. So this is not restricted to water and wastewater. We have multiple different sectors of local, state, federal government that need help, and we're just not doing it right now. So I'm hoping we really just get off our butts and really start doing it.
Before we move on to our next story, we have to spend a few moments with our sponsor, Packet Labs. Trust the ethical hackers at Packet Labs for expert penetration testing services. Their certified professionals specialize in strengthening your security posture. Download their free penetration testing buyer's guide at ciso.packetlabs.net and get the top 20 questions to ask third-party vendors before hiring them. Let them guide you through this process to help you find the perfect match for your organization's security needs. Bipartisan bill allows for U.S. ban of TikTok. On Tuesday, U.S. senators introduced bipartisan legislation called the Restrict Act that would give the Commerce Department the ability to ban foreign technology deemed a national security risk. Its key area of focus was TikTok collecting personal data of U.S. citizens and potentially carrying out influence operations. TikTok spokesperson Brooke Oberwetter countered by saying a U.S. ban on TikTok is a ban on the export of American culture and values to the billion-plus people who use our service worldwide. Some chef's kiss, classic counter propaganda there. So, Nick,
Lord.
the story is based in the U.S. Same discussion is being held in other countries. In Canada, banned TikTok on government devices. Europe is certainly investigating this as well. In your opinion, has TikTok gone too far, and would banning it be helpful, or I guess just more of the Streisand effect?
So interestingly enough, TikTok is running scared right now because we've seen state governments here in the United States. To your point, I believe Germany's banned it. Ireland and the UK, I believe, have also done that. India is looking at that as well.
Yeah.
I think Australia. So this is not news. But what TikTok can't get around is the whistleblowers that have come forward with recorded audio of American TikTok employees saying, "Oh yeah, well we got to go call whatever his name in China because that's the guy that gets access to this." They've already admitted they replicate all of the U.S. TikTok data from their Oracle infrastructure over to Singapore. God knows who has access to that. And they've gotten to the point where, interestingly enough, if you didn't know, TikTok in China is very heavily regulated. If you're under, I think it's the age of 18 or whatever, you're restricted to 40 minutes a day. They prioritize educational stuff where, our 18 and unders can basically sit on TikTok all day long, melting their brains with stupid videos while being data mined, not to mention the reverse engineering of their app and on and on. I have written on this. I have yelled about this. So I think that this is not a bridge too far at all. I think we really need to be looking at this. We've got a huge problem with the largest authoritarian and surveillance state on the planet spreading their technology that's being adopted everywhere. And they're actually now starting to respond to this. If you didn't know, in the last 24 hours or so, they came out and said, if your account is 18 and under on TikTok here in the United States, now you're restricted to 60 minutes a day. On top of that, we already know, again, thanks to whistleblowers, that they are prioritizing to make things go viral, meaning I could have no presence, but if I do something that is favorable to the state of China, they could make that go viral. And now we're impressing the youth. So I think this is a huge thing. I don't think we're done with TikTok. And quite frankly, I have not heard any response or excuse from them that makes me want to say, okay, we're good now. Let me install that on my phone. No way. Absolutely not.
Yeah, the rush to Project Clover was the thing they just announced in Europe to have all sorts of data controls. Project Texas they've had on the books for a while. All of the youth controls and stuff like that. And yeah, to your point, they're definitely playing by a different set of expectations with Douyin in China ByteDance's. So it will be interesting to see how the politics and also the cybersecurity implications of it play out for sure. The seemingly never-ending well of TikTok news. We will be covering it here probably in future weeks for
Absolutely.
sure. Next up here, cybersecurity leaders are stressed about email security. According to a 2023 email security risk report from Egress, 91% of cybersecurity leaders polled said that company data had been leaked externally by email, aka, I guess people just used email. The top three causes of the leaks were reckless employee behavior, human error, which I guess is non reckless behavior, and intentional data exfiltration. The report also revealed that 86% of surveyed organizations were impacted by phishing emails, with 85% reporting that such attacks resulted in a successful account takeover. 95% of cybersecurity leaders are frustrated with the limited effectiveness of both their secure email gateway and security awareness and training programs. The old
Yeah.
horse to beat that happens to be deceased for cybersecurity professionals. So, Nick, email's been around, I think, for a little while now. I have to check the exact date there.
Slightly.
Yet,
Slightly.
seems like it's a significant security threat, as this and other research continually shows. Why has it remained such a loose cannon all of these years?
Yeah, well, to go off on a slight tangent regarding cybersecurity and CISO stress, I recently wrote an article, I want to say like a month or two ago, regarding burnout in basically top tier cybersecurity professionals. That polls have been done that, in the next 2 years or so, we're going to see some of the top guard retire, wash out, that kind of thing. They're also not feeling like they have as much responsibility anymore, or taking responsibility when breaches happen. And so that's obviously a huge, huge issue. And there you go. But if you're talking about email specifically, honestly, with all of these issues, I really think it does come back to complacency. Like I mentioned earlier, we are creatures of habit. And so despite the advancements, the Slacks, the Microsoft Teams, the other collaborative platforms of the world, this basic form of communication just really isn't going away, in the same way that we're not getting rid of text message, anytime soon. It's just part of the technology ecosystem until we figure out a better way. And so what we've done with email over the years is we simply just bolt on more security. No longer ever are we running open SMTP relays. We've got center policy frameworks and DKIMs and DMARCs and all this kind of stuff. But a lot of companies are not even adopting that. We see it in the wild when email doesn't go through, and it's like, oh, this company doesn't have a DMARC yet, which is kind of just surprising.
Baffling.
Right? The other side of that, though, is the training side. To the point that you made earlier, is that not everybody's training. And usually, unfortunately, usually when that happens, it's because the world is burned down. The breach has happened. Now we're going to train everybody, but it's a huge problem. We see business email compromise scams, ransomware get through, and so yeah, this isn't going away, and it's going to continue to be a stressful point. And if you're looking at it, you have to build a perimeter around your email, just like you have to build a perimeter around any network you're defending, right? And it doesn't start and stop with a spam filter.
I do take one, I guess, like 91% saying, data was leaked externally by email. I do wonder how, like, that's an incredibly broad net, right? Like if
Right.
you attach an internal company memo about coffee day or something like that, and that accidentally gets sent to a client or something like that, technically that's leaked company from, like, there is a spectrum of
Right.
data. Now, to all your other points, absolutely spot on. I just found that like such an incredibly broad brush to like
Right.
that happens, I'm sure, every single day with every
Right, but
organization.
what that underscores is a lack of data classification in organizations for cybersecurity framework. Because, okay, if my shopping list that I give my assistant gets leaked, I'm not losing sleep over it. My social security number gets leaked, I'm going to shoot somebody. So the other side of that too is that they're not obviously putting in DLP, or data loss prevention, because
Mhm.
you have the Office 365s of the world and other enterprise mail services where if I'm that employee that falls for it and says, oh yes, Prince Mbutu from Nigeria, here's my bank routing number and my social security number, hit send, the email systems just say, hey, wait a second, that looks like a social security number, block it, and then alert the cybersecurity team to say, hey, Nick is sending things he shouldn't. And these things are just simply not in place. But at this point, they're table stakes because email is such a sore thumb. It really is.
Maybe a generative AI system could look for that kind of information in your email. And that brings us to our last story of the day, the impact of AI tools on email attacks. The security firm Darktrace reports it's seen an increase of threat actors using artificial intelligence tools to operate sophisticated scams and operations since the general release of OpenAI's ChatGPT. I don't think this was unexpected in any
Right.
way, Nick, with ChatGPT able to write semi convincing content, not only for emails, but anywhere that people communicate. So, Again, no surprise there. I'm curious, what are your thoughts about the potential for ChatGPT to continue as a tool for cybercrime? We've seen, dark web forums and stuff like that using it to try and write malware, since this thing can, theoretically write code. I'm just curious of your thoughts.
And in other news, water is wet. The sky is blue. I mean, like this is this is table stakes, man. So I've written two separate articles on this. One that actually for Forbes that got released this morning on this, that this is going to be a vehicle for these things. I just read an article, I don't know if it's true yet, that the first bug bounty may have actually been awarded to ChatGPT. So it goes both ways, assuming that is true. I haven't followed up on that, but I saw that at a glance as I was looking through news today. But yes, this is absolutely, it's not just cybercrime, but you can have this right, APIs, you can have it write code, and there have been successful attempts to researchers writing malicious code, that can infect, launch PowerShell, do all of these other things that you would expect a threat actor to use. And so absolutely. And one of the things that's a big problem is we're talking about the Chat GPTs and Google Bards of the world, but there are plenty of LLMs in other countries that are being spun up, and those countries may have a lot less scruples or regulation around the regulation of these LLMs, or I might be able to get access to one of those from, here in the United States. And so we're going to see this continue to explode. On top of that, we're also going to see issues with things like disinformation campaigns. That was my first article on this, that it's going to drop a supercharger into this. And so by virtue of that, we're already seeing a cottage industry of tools and utilities and approaches on how to detect Chat GPT and other LLMs. So like Detect GPT out of Stanford is a recent one, looking for term papers that were written by Chat GPT. So we're going to see this go both ways. And like with anything, they innovate, we innovate. And with innovation comes opportunity for exploitation. And so this is the latest innovation, so it's going to be exploited. There's no exceptions to that. Absolutely.
All right, well, before we get out of here, was there any story that made your eyes roll, or you had a big thumb up for, just something you reacted strongly to today?
Honestly, I mean, I've been talking about the water problem for so long, and it's such a critical thing that, just having somebody get in there and mess with the controls could potentially poison a population. That is something that's deeply concerning to me. And also, I just hope that Congress can come together and just vote for security. It's something that we all agree on, even if our politicians hate each other. So those are the two that really kind of just stick out of my brain today.
All right, well, thank you so much, Nick Espinosa, the host of the Deep Dive Radio Show. You're everywhere. You're on the radio. You're writing stuff. Where can people find all of your great stuff?
Yeah. I mean, you can follow me Facebook and Twitter /NickAESP, on LinkedIn and YouTube /Nick Espinosa, and my all my past radio shows are on SoundCloud. Come hang out. Come connect to me.
We will have the links in the show notes for sure. Thanks also to our sponsor, Packet Labs. Trust the ethical hackers at Packet Labs for expert penetration testing services. A reminder to join us next Friday for Super Cyber Friday, where our topic will be hacking Kubernetes, an hour of critical thinking on dealing with new and emerging complex and transient container environments. We'll be back with another episode of the Weekend Review Show. And in the meantime, you can get your daily news fix every single day. Give us about 6 minutes with cybersecurity headlines. We would love to have you. You can also subscribe to the show through our newsletter on LinkedIn. You can check out Nick's stuff while you're there. Subscribe to our newsletter. You can read and hear the show right from your inbox. Just go to the CISO Series page on LinkedIn to subscribe. I'm Rich Stroffolino from the Weekend Review and the CISO Series, reminding you to have a super sparkly day.
Cybersecurity headlines are available every weekday. Head to CISOSeries.com for the full stories behind the headlines.